Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. My name is Felix Schrodinger, and I don't understand jokes. I have a sense of humor, but I don't understand jokes, especially if someone becomes the victim of a joke, and especially if I become the victim. And by the way, I have a cat, and like all cats, she likes to get into boxes, but in fact into all sorts of containers and enclosed spaces. I have no idea why. It's just a cat's way. I think you may have heard of Schrodinger's cat, although you may be a little unsure of what it means. Schrodinger, famous, not me and not my grandfather, was a physicist. He gave his name to a thought experiment in which he placed an imaginary cat in a box with a mechanism that might or might not kill the cat, depending on a random subatomic event. We will only know if the cat is alive or dead by opening the box. Until then, the cat is alive and dead at the same time. The way you interpret this thought experiment leads to a decision whether we live in a multiverse or not, so at least from a physics perspective, it's a pretty big deal. A joke often serves as a cover for aggression. Having run over a joker, you will hear, "Don't you get the jokes?" I was just joking. Have you lost your sense of humor? And many other variations on this theme. I worked hard at university because I knew that my parents were trying their best to help with their studies while the other guys were having fun, and so I became the center of pranks from rich kids who saw my infatuation as a kind of coded criticism. This explains to some extent my allergy to April Fool's Day. So often it turns out to be extremely unpleasant. Someone tries too hard and is completely uninspired, commits a joke that on any other day would be perceived as an invitation to get hit. But on this day, he has a free pass. And if you object, it means you can't take a joke. Okay, and back to my story. These days you may well have heard of me, but at the time these events took place, I was an aspiring biotech entrepreneur. I've already done well enough to have my own house in a decent part of London. It was the first day of April, and a month earlier you could say that everything was perfect. My friend Sarah moved in with me, and my friends said she was perfect for me. I admit that I have a tendency to be a little tense, try to plan everything, and it's not easy for me to relax. But this is also one of the reasons why I had a house in London when I was not yet 30. They saw that Sarah was helping me not to take things too seriously. She was funny. I worked pretty hard because there was an opportunity to make a major deal with a major pharmaceutical concern to provide them with important precursors for a range of drugs at a price that was less than usual. It was because we came up with another way to produce them. I knew that if we made a deal, I would be ready for life. And I was the kind of guy who proposed to his girlfriend only when he was sure he could support her and the family he hoped to have. I already bought the ring, but I was delaying the offer. Unfortunately, Sarah didn't seem to appreciate it. Fun was important to her, and as far as she understood, I wasn't as fun as I used to be. And then her university friend Mark was kicked out of the apartment, and she insisted that we let him live in a spare room, saying it would only take a couple of days. By the 1st of April, he had been there for 2 weeks and seemed to feel quite comfortable, which is quite logical since he has not paid rent and has not yet completed the course on loading and unloading the dishwasher. When he arrived, I didn't ask him for anything, as it was only supposed to be for a couple of days. Strangely enough, although he irritated me immensely, I did not see him as a competitor in the romantic sense. No ambitions, immature. There are not enough manners, uncultured. He is proud of his ignorance. I hope you understand the picture. On top of that, Sarah assured me that they had never had a relationship, and to be honest, I'm pretty sure she wasn't lying. The job was done. The contract was signed, dated Friday the 1st of April, and I could move on with our plans. For the first time in a long time, I left work at 4. I told my secretary Gail that I was leaving. She asked if I was heading home, which, looking back, was strange, since she usually never asked me about it, but then I didn't pay any attention to it. I had plans for the evening. I had plans, and they definitely didn't include Mark. He could spend his time, as always, watching a pointless reality show. We're going to a fancy restaurant, and at some point I'll take out a small box, get down on one knee, and ask a question. That's how I saw that evening. But as one famous German general said, no plan can withstand contact with the enemy. Items of intimate clothing in the hall and on the stairs. Sounds coming from above. Sarah's voice screamed in ecstasy. Mark grunted, then said, "That's right. Take it, you fool." Sarah screamed, "Use me, Mark, use me." There were 11 steps, and each of them seemed to be a meter high. I got to the top, and he was facing our bedroom door. All I had to do was reach out and open it. Use me, stud. I threw up, quietly and without warning, and suddenly I could think. I turned around and went down the stairs. Strangely, it seemed quiet upstairs, although I was pretty sure they hadn't heard me. I wrote a short note in the kitchen. When I get back, it's better for Mark to leave. Otherwise, his next place of residence will be a hospital room. You will also need to find another place to live. I got out, got in the car, and drove to the Venus bar. I parked, went in, and ordered a Diet Coke. I only drink alcohol when I'm happy, but not when I need to think. The Venus bar serves mostly the dregs of humanity, or so it seems. Strangely enough, it is located in a rather posh part of London, but this does not match either the interior or the visitors. That's why I go there in difficult times. It gives me perspective. After a few minutes, I started to see the positives. On some level, I already felt that something was wrong. That's why I didn't propose to her earlier. At least we haven't been married yet. Strangely, what angered me most at that moment was not infidelity, not disrespect, but stupidity. Besides, I was wondering what the hell she saw in the stamp. I know I looked at him through the eyes of a man, but I don't think he was particularly handsome. He didn't keep himself in shape like me, despite my workload. And of course, he wasn't dapper, and he didn't have any prospects. Those were my thoughts as I sat there. Then she entered the bar. Magnificent. She is dressed elegantly and beautifully. High black heels. What I was pretty sure of were stockings, not tights. It was completely out of place in the Venus bar, and I knew it. All these sneaky guys turned their heads like crocodiles on the riverbank, ready to slide into the water, grab a tempting calf and drag it under the water. She held the phone to her ear and was talking venomously. A joke? April Fool? I can't believe you did this to me, knowing how I feel about it. It was obvious that tears were about to flow. Will you be here in half an hour? What am I supposed to do now? I don't even have any money or cards because you took them out of my wallet? Her voice became incredulous. Should I ask someone to buy me a drink? Here? At that moment, she broke down and ended the conversation. Now she just stood there, not knowing what to do. I didn't know I was going to step in. I beg your pardon? She shuddered. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation, and I have a suggestion. She turned and looked at me with understandable suspicion. Then she did something like a double take. You look kind of familiar. Have we met before? Now it was me who was caught off guard, and I responded with spontaneous honesty. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I'd remember you. You're beautiful. She blushed slightly, and before she could answer, I added, I'm Felix Schrodinger. She smiled, and it was the most charming smile I've ever seen. Wow, it's clear. I saw your picture today. You are the owner of Mendel's Garden, aren't you? My editor wanted me to find out if you got that huge contract that everyone is talking about with Paradise Pharmaceuticals. I was amazed that so much attention was being paid to me. I'm April Fuller. I just started working at the Financial Times, sort of on probation. I was glad that she was at least open to talking to me. I was going to suggest that you go to the nearby bar of the Regency Hotel. He's a little more decent than this one, and then you won't be here when he shows up. She smiled, but then became a little worried. As you've probably heard, I don't have any money with me. I laughed. Well, it just so happens that after signing a certain deal today, I can afford to have a couple of drinks. April grinned and nodded. I turned to the bartender, put a tenner on the counter, much more than my Diet Coke was worth, and said, keep the change, and when the guy comes and asks about the lady, just tell him that she left with a rich guy in a suit. Can you do that? He winked at us and said, of course. I hope he gets the joke. We went to the next bar. It amused me that the Venus bar could be adjacent to a 4-star hotel. The Regency bar was perfect for private conversations, and we were sitting in a semi-closed booth. We ordered coffee. So, Felix, how did it happen that you ended up in a place like the Venus bar alone, especially when it seems that you have something to celebrate? I realized that this must seem strange to her. Well, it's kind of a tradition for me. When something goes wrong, I go and sit in the Venus bar and watch people, and soon I realize that my life is much better than most people there, no matter what temporary grief I'm going through. It's probably some kind of therapy. April looked puzzled. I thought you said you had signed a contract. I laughed mirthlessly. Well, today at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was heading home, going to celebrate this event with my girlfriend and maybe even propose to her. At 4:30, I listened to her already celebrating with her ex-boyfriend. I explained what happened and what led to it. And then my phone rang. It was Sarah. "I'm sorry, April, but I guess I should answer. She's already tried several times." I took a deep breath and clicked on the icon. For some reason, I turned on the speakerphone. I guess I wanted April to know that I wasn't making up what I told her. "Felix, thank God I caught you. It was just a prank. We didn't really do anything. If you had entered the bedroom, you would have seen this. I didn't know you'd react like that. Just come back and we'll explain everything." Suddenly, I felt completely calm. There was no conflict inside me anymore because I had made a decision. "First of all, forget we. I wish your fucking boyfriend had left by the time I get back. He's been living rent-free in my house for 2 weeks now without even thanking me, unless, of course, you count today. But Felix, and you'd better find another place to live as soon as possible. But Felix, you misunderstood everything. It was just a joke, an April Fool's joke. Not really. Sarah, how about a little thought experiment? Try to imagine telling someone this story and convincing them that you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, why don't you try it for real? Tell someone how you were in our bedroom with your ex-boyfriend, making all the sounds that accompany passionate love, but that it was all completely innocent." There was a slight pause this time. "Felix, it's not like that at all." April surprised me by picking up the phone and talking into it. "Hi, Sarah, we can start this experiment right now. I just heard your story, and you certainly didn't convince me." Another pause on the other end of the line. "Who are you?" April grinned. "I'm just a girl that Felix picked up at a bar and invited for a drink. I guess you could say that we both don't understand jokes." Then I took the phone and disconnected. We looked at each other and laughed, and then April said, "You know, Felix, the funny thing is that I feel like she's telling the truth." She looked at me thoughtfully. "I know. I have the same feeling, but I'm sure it doesn't matter." It was clear that she understood and agreed, and I was happy that she didn't need to explain. "Okay, April, one good turn deserves another. You asked about the contract." She smiled and said, "Listen, Felix, I don't want to take advantage of you. Please don't tell me things you shouldn't. Oh, don't worry about it. They have already agreed that it can be made public and left it to me. Our company is not listed on the stock market, so there is no problem with manipulating stock prices. I was going to wait until Monday to issue a press release, but nothing prevents it from being earlier, and the contract itself must be publicly available due to EU competition rules." She looked interested. "Give me your email address, April." She did so, and I sent her a scan of the signed contract. "Why don't you call your editor and write a note?" Her eyes lit up. "Are you sure? I mean, it would really help me." "Of course. I'm not going anywhere." "Can you dictate a note over the phone?" She nodded. "Then go ahead." She called the editor. "Hi, Reg, this is April. You asked me to find out about the deal with Mendel's Garden." She turned on the speakerphone. "Okay, do you have anything?" "Yes, I can confirm that the contract was signed today for 3.2 million euros. I think having years of experience meant he was careful." "It sounds tempting, April, but do you have any proof?" "Maybe someone is just playing games here." "No, I have an impeccable source. I just sent you a scan of the contract." There was a very short pause. Then he came back and his voice sounded a little worried. "Well, it looks authentic, but how did you get it? I mean, there could be legal issues." At that moment, I picked up the phone. "Hi, Reg, this is Felix Schrodinger, the owner of Mendel's Garden. We'll send my selfie with April in a minute to prove that I'm not an imposter and everything is fine. I was going to wait until Monday to break the news, but we met by chance, and April persuaded me to tell her the details. We asked the waiter to take a picture of us at the table, and we sent the photo to her editor. Then she dictated her story over the phone, which took surprisingly little time and impressed me with how she was able to put her thoughts in order and build a coherent article without pen and paper. Intelligence can be very gentle. When she finished, she laughed and said, "Well, things are definitely going well. I feel much better." Just at that moment, her phone rang. The name Dan appeared on the screen. Damn it, I guessed it was her boyfriend. After a moment's hesitation, she picked up the phone and also turned on the speakerphone. "Yes? Hi, baby. Where are you?" "At the bar. I'm having a drink, as you suggested." "Okay, tell me where it is and I'll come and get you." "No." "What do you mean, baby? Are you mad at me? It was just a joke." "Oh, I'm not angry. More, I'm having a great time with Felix." "Who is Felix?" "Oh, I get it. You're just fooling me." "No, Dan. Felix is a wonderful man who took me to a much nicer bar and bought me a drink. And so my birthday begins to please. Wow. So it was her birthday. He did this to her on her birthday. April 1st. Her parents named her April. And I thought I was the one who was having a bad time. Hey baby, I get it. Maybe I went too far this time. Just tell me where you are. His voice was starting to sound a little whiny. I picked up the phone. Hi Dan, this is Felix. We're probably going to eat something now and celebrate April's birthday in style. Don't wait. I wondered if I had gone too far, and half expected April to step in, but she was clearly pleased. Hey April, that's enough. You've already had fun. Now she's taken my phone away from me. What's the matter, Dan? Don't you get the jokes? See you later. Or maybe in the morning. She ended the conversation and then did something complicated with her phone. What are you doing? I'm blocking his number. I can't turn off my phone yet because of work. They may need something. When I mentioned inviting her to a gala dinner, I didn't think much of it, but she took me seriously, and I decided that I was more than happy with the idea. It took me 2 minutes to book a table at the nearest French restaurant with a good reputation. She was clearly a little worried now. Listen, Felix, I feel a little awkward about this, and it might be awkward for you to invite a journalist to dinner, so I'll understand if... I laughed. How about I just invite April, an intelligent and interesting woman whom I would like to get to know better, to dinner? And in the interests of full disclosure, she's also quite attractive and dressed incredibly attractively. And if you're not happy with that, I'd understand if... Now she laughed. In that case, I will gladly go to lunch with a man who knows how to be smart and sensitive without being a wimp. And in the interest of full disclosure, he is also a cliché of a tall, dark-haired, and handsome stranger. And he looks very good in a suit, so lead the way. When I entered the restaurant with April on my arm, I couldn't help but notice that many men's attention immediately focused on her. Perhaps it was a more posh clientele, but the reality was not much different from the sloppy guys at the Venus bar. The food was great, even if the waiter was a little pretentious, but it didn't matter since we both felt the same way. We sat down at 7 and suddenly it turned out to be 10. We talked so casually and laughed so freely, and then it became clear that while they were enduring, they needed a table. During the evening, our hands involuntarily touched more than once, and more often I found myself looking into her beautiful bluish-green eyes and physically reacting to how she modestly lowered her eyes and then raised them again, and even bit her lower lip once or twice, which I was sure it was not intentionally seductive, but it was all the more exciting because it was unconscious. April's expression suddenly became serious and she said, I had such a wonderful evening. This is the best birthday I've ever had. And I have to admit that the thought of going back to the apartment and meeting Dan is really depressing. I felt the same way. I knew I'd have to deal with Sarah if she was still there, but the thought of this encounter is guaranteed to ruin the memories of this evening. Okay. So what if I book us a couple of rooms at the Regency, so we can sleep here and deal with all the shit in the morning? I hoped that by emphasizing the aspect of the 2 rooms, she would understand that I was not trying to impose myself on her. We had just left the restaurant when she suddenly stopped on the sidewalk and pulled me towards her. Looking into my eyes, she said, You're not going to stay with Sarah, are you? I didn't even have to think about it. God, no. Good. And I'm done with Dan. I wondered what this was leading to, starting to feel the stirring of something that I couldn't identify yet, but that made me feel much more alive than I had in a long time. But Felix, you've already spent more than enough money. I wanted to object, but she continued, So let's save money and rent only 1 room. I think my smile said it all. Then she put her hands on my neck and pulled me to her upturned face, saying, And I think it's time for me to get the birthday kiss I've been dreaming about all evening. Since the invention of the kiss, there have been 5 kisses that were considered the most passionate, the purest. This one left them all behind. None of us had words for how we felt. We walked to the hotel in silence, my jacket draped over her shoulders to protect her from the evening chill, and I hugged her. At the hotel reception, April didn't feel the need to keep a distance between us, rather proudly showing with her body language that she was with me. I splashed out on a rather luxurious room. Why not? I just signed a contract worth millions. At first, we just looked around like children in a fairy tale. Then I turned to April and said, I know it's your birthday today, but can I unwrap my present? Suddenly a little embarrassed, she nodded. I took my time. At first, he just took my jacket from her. Then I moved away a little to look at her in an exquisite dark green dress. The material looked and felt like silk. You look so adorable. So beautiful and so sweet. I can't believe this is happening. She smiled shyly, not knowing what to say, but clearly enjoying the compliment. I didn't say anything, but I thought Dan really screwed up. He would never find another woman who could match April. Then I walked over to her and stood behind her to slowly unzip the zipper. In the silence of the room, I could hear her uneven breathing. It took all my self-control to take my time. I wanted to capture every second of this experience in my memory, convinced that life would never again be able to offer me something so sublime. I let the dress fall to the floor at her feet. Perhaps it really was silk, since it behaved almost like a liquid and not like a cloth. I really hope you like neck kisses, April. Because I'm going to kiss you. I felt her shudder. I love kissing on the neck, but I think you can kiss me anywhere. I kissed her neck, enjoying how soft, smooth, and warm she felt under my lips. I let go of her bra and pulled it off her shoulders. Standing behind her, I stretched out my arms to hug her. I know that my breasts are not very big. Like every woman, she had her doubts, and as in many cases, they were absurd. I shocked her by suddenly turning her to face me. Stop. She looked at me a little shocked. April, everything you said tonight was so smart, so true, so funny, and completely true in every way. So please don't ruin everything now by saying something stupid. Your breasts are perfect, and by the time we're done, it might hurt a little bit. I reached out and pinched her nipple, showing her something other than tenderness for the first time. She could be heard gasping. Get out of your shoes, April. The truth was that I liked to see her in stilettos and stockings, but her feet should hurt after an evening spent in them, and I wanted everything to be just for her pleasure. She did as I asked and stood in front of me in stockings, garters, and black lace panties. She was clearly not an expert at wearing such underwear as she fastened stockings over panties, but oddly enough, I found it cute. Maybe it even meant that I was the only man who undressed her while she was wearing stockings. When I was younger, I'm sure I couldn't have done it without messing it up, but I took my time, and soon she was standing there in just stockings and a garter belt. I've never seen a better sight in my life. April spoke up now. Felix, I don't think I can undress you quickly, and I desperately need you. Please undress as soon as possible. I need you. She didn't have to ask me twice. As soon as I was naked, she surprised me by kneeling in front of me. April, that's not necessary. Before I could continue, she replied, No, but I want to. I'm not submissive. Not a bit. At least that's what I thought. But with you, Felix. I lifted her to her feet, hugged her and kissed her hard, putting my tongue between her lips. Although it didn't seem particularly small, I found that I had no difficulty picking it up. Perhaps it was the power of my desire that made me stronger than usual. I lifted her onto the bed, leaving her dainty little stockinged feet dangling over the edge. I knelt between my legs and kissed my left leg. When I got to the vulva, I smelled the scent of arousal, and it was intoxicating. April had a delicate, soft, curly fur there. She propped herself up on her elbows to see what I was doing. You know I'm an atheist, but I think I've just found religion, and you're my goddess. She laughed. Looking down at me with a passionate expression on her face, she said, Well, I just hope you're going to commit sacrilege and desecrate my sanctum sanctorum. I took it as an invitation. April was the most sympathetic woman I've ever known. At first, she gently put her hands on my head, but soon lost control, and her hands lay next to me, twitching convulsively as she screamed my name. Obviously my name. When she came to her senses, she dragged me to the bed, laid me on my back and sat astride. I smiled at her and said, So much for submission. She grinned and replied with mock severity, Are you complaining? I did my best to appear chastened and said, I never dreamed of it, mistress. She told me she was taking birth control pills and we agreed to make love. I think we both wanted absolute intimacy so that nothing would happen between us when I penetrated her. If I had been in charge, I would have been softer, but she was obviously so worked up that tenderness was no longer necessary. For a while, we just lay there, too exhausted to do more than give each other gentle caresses, looking into each other's eyes. We were going to take a shower, but eventually fell asleep, sweaty and smelling strongly of love. I barely had the strength to pull the blanket over us and turn off the nightlights. We took a shower in the morning. We had love in our soul. Then I asked for breakfast to be brought to the room, and we spent a decadent time feeding each other in bed, which turned out to be pretty dirty, and my conscience made me leave a big tip to the cleaners. When she turned on her phone, she received several messages from the editor. Her story made the front page and was printed under her name, and she was given a permanent position. The last message made us both laugh. It was from Reg, asking if she could get me to do an interview. Then we went our separate ways to do the less pleasant things that awaited us, but already happy with the knowledge that we would see each other in the evening to celebrate April's promotion. I got home at 10:30 that morning. I wondered if I would have to physically evict Mark, but as it turned out, he left. I walked in and found Sarah sitting at the dining table in the living room sipping coffee. She didn't look too good, and it occurred to me that despite making love to April for a long time, I might have slept more than she did. Thank God you're here, Felix. Now we can sort it out. I went and poured myself a cup of coffee. At that moment, it dawned on me that I couldn't remember her ever cooking or pouring me coffee. I went over and sat down at the table, sitting at the opposite end. Where were you last night, Felix? I was amused that for some reason she felt entitled to ask me questions. Nevertheless, I indulged her. I'm staying at a hotel. Alone? No, I spent the night with April. Just saying her name made me feel warm, but obviously it didn't affect Sarah the same way. How could you do that, Felix? What about us? I tilted my head slightly to one side, as if I was examining a particularly exotic beetle. Sarah, in my opinion, we ended yesterday, or rather a little after 4. She looked at me in disappointment. But I told you, Felix, it was just a prank. If you had opened the door, she really didn't understand. Sarah, do you know the whole story about Schrodinger's cat? She looked at me, not understanding what was going on. Yes, of course, you explained everything to me. How do you open the box to see if the cat is alive or dead? But I don't understand what this has to do with the case. Among other things, you didn't open the door. It's a pity that you didn't do it then. I stopped her. No, that's the point. I didn't have to open the door. I could see that she still didn't understand. If I had opened the door, I might have seen you both naked on our bed. Her disappointment showed again. But I told you, Felix, that you couldn't see it because it didn't happen. If you ask your secretary, Gail, she'll tell you how I asked her to let me know when you were heading home. I wouldn't do it if it was real. I continued as if she hadn't said anything. Or another possibility would be that I would climb up these stairs, tormented by these sounds, vomit at the top in disgust, and open the door only to see the two of you, fully dressed, far from each other, laughing at me and saying, April fool. Finally, she stopped talking. You see, Sarah, I didn't open the door because I didn't need to. Anyway, our relationship was dead. The epilogue. April 1st, 4 years later, Jade Mountain Resort, St. Lucia. I just watched April come out of the infinity pool, silhouetted against the sunset. She's expecting our first child, and the bump is just starting to show. It has become our custom to leave at the end of March and return at the beginning of April, without telling anyone where we are going. I am too young to retire, despite the fact that I can easily afford it. Now I work only when I want to, and I look forward to the opportunity to take an active part in the upbringing of our children. I recently learned from a friend at the time that I was probably the only person who believed Sarah when she said she hadn't made love to Mark. Even her own mother didn't believe her. I guess you could say it was a joke on her, but I don't think she was funny.